Okay, are we on? Yes, we are online. Okay. Well, good afternoon for who are attending us in Brazil, and good evening for our friends from Palestine. It's a great honor to have now already seventh session lecture, and this is a very important lecture on cultural aspects of the Palestinian society. As we all know, to destroy people, destroying its culture is the last phase. So I'm happy I will pass to our colleague Ragda, who will introduce the two professors. And I already thank you very much, both Lamis and Sonia, to make your time disposable to give this lecture to us. Please, Ragda.
Thank you, Dr. Giorgio. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy that we are having this lecture about Palestinian culture with the amazing Lamis and Dr. Sonia. I will start by introducing our first speaker, Lamis Abbas. She is the chair of the Palestine and Arabic Studies, the PASS program at Birzeit University. She's a lecturer at the university's Faculty of Arts within the Department of Languages and the Translation. She holds a master's degree in translation from Yarmouk University in Jordan and has been working at Birzeit since 2008. Lamis has dedicated her efforts to promoting and advancing Arabic language education for international students and fostering greater understanding of Palestinian culture. Through strategic collaboration with and partnerships with the universities worldwide. She has played a key role in promoting both language learning and cultural exchange. And from my side, I would say that the PASS program is a great program that we talked about, and I'm sure she will talk more about it by the end of the session. The second speaker is Dr. Sonia Nimr. She's a Palestinian writer, researcher, and academic, born in Jenin in 1955. She's a professor of philosophy and cultural studies at Birzeit University in Palestine. She is known for her distinguished contributions to academic research in the fields of oral history and collective memory. She is also a write for children and young adults and has published over 24 books, has been awarded numerous prizes, and her work has been translated into many languages, including 3 books in Portuguese. So thank you for attending, and I will give the floor to Lamis. Please, Lamis.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Ragda, for this introduction. I'd like also to thank UFABC and Professor Giorgio for organizing this initiative. It's really heartwarming to see your eagerness to learn about my country's struggle for freedom and liberation. And it's also interesting to know that you're interested to hear from Palestinian professors and learn about Palestine firsthand. First, please allow me to salute and bow to my people in beloved Gaza. In this lecture, we will be talking about Palestinian culture and how it has been used by Palestinians as a tool for resistance. Beyond the political turmoil and that often dominates headlines, there exists a people with vibrant traditions and culture. And because Palestinians have collectively experienced so much displacement and devastation over the last century, sustaining Palestinian culture is vital for holding the community together and keeping their identity. The Palestinian people's history, struggle, aspirations are often embodied in artistic expression, such as music, art, dance, film, and literature. Even diaspora Palestinian communities preserve their culture to carry a sense of home with them wherever they are. So in this lecture, I hope that you will see Palestine through a different and less known lens. So if we start with the main points, I will be focusing on literature, music, art, graffiti, photography, cartoons, cinema, and then I will end by talking about challenges facing Palestinian culture and also give you some suggested online sources. And finally, I'll talk about my program, the past program, for just a couple of minutes, okay? So let me begin with the first slide. And in this slide, I will begin with talking about literature. I chose to start with poets and writers because they have been working hard during the last century to protect the Palestinian narrative from being lost or distorted. So in the writing, there were so many important themes like, for example, loss of the land, attachment to the land, confrontations with injustice, steadfastness, and freedom. So those Palestinian poets and writers were very important. In addition, also the poets and writers in the diaspora were very, very influential, but they focused on different themes, such as exile, return, and their identity, also preserving their identity. So I will begin by talking about Brahim Tuqan and Fadwa Tuqan. I chose to talk about them because they were born before Nakba in the city of Nablus, to the south of the West Bank. And it's important to talk about our cultural figures before Nakba because what the Israeli occupation and the colonial state of Israel is trying to do is to portray Palestine as the land that had no people before the Nakba. So it's totally not true because we have Ibrahim Tuqan, for example. He was born in Nablus in 1905, and he is widely considered a pioneering Palestinian poet of the 20th century. His poetry was revolutionary and nationalist in character. Among his famous poems was Mawtini, which was written in 1934, and it was put to music by a composer called Muhammad Flaifel. And later it became the unofficial anthem of the state of Palestine. And then it was made the anthem of Iraq after the US invasion in 2003. Fadwa Tuqan is the sister, actually. She's the sister of Ibrahim Tuqan. And she also was a very prominent figure in Arab literature. She was among the most famous Arab female poets in the 20th century. And she was called the poetess of Palestine. Her poetry represented a strong basis of female experience in love, revolution, and women's protest against society. Now we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, of course, I'm sure that plenty of you know Mahmoud Darwish. Mahmoud Darwish is one of the most prominent Palestinian cultural symbols of modern times. Actually, I would like to give you an idea about the life of Mahmoud Darwish so that you can understand the importance of his personal experience in his literature. So Mahmoud Darwish was after the establishment of the colonialist state of Israel in 1984, Darwish witnessed massacres, and his family decided to escape to Lebanon. A year later, they decided to come back, but they did that secretly, and they went back to their village and discovered that it was totally destroyed. So they decided to stay in the neighboring village of Deir al-Assad in the Galilee. Darwish began writing poetry at a very young age, though there were no books in his home. He was arrested and imprisoned at the age of 16, and on many other occasions for reciting revolutionary poetry. During his imprisonment, Darwish wrote some of his greatest poems, such as A Lover from Palestine, which is a very, very important poetry collection and poet by Mahmoud Darwish, and also Mother, which is also a very famous and very sentimental, actually, a poem. And here you can see some parts of this poem, Mother, in which he addressed his mother from a prison cell, So it was, it touches the soul. Okay, his literary works were translated into more than 22 languages, and many of his poetry works are available online. You can find them online, and many of them were translated also. He was awarded dozens of national and international awards. Darwish died in 2008, and he was buried next to Ramallah Cultural Center or Palace, on the grounds of a space that hosts today the Mahmoud Darwish Museum and Al-Birwe Garden. Al-Birwe is the name of his original village that was destroyed during Nakba. And if you can see here on this slide, I included this video, a link to a video that has a poem for Mahmoud Darwish. He recited the poem, and he is accompanied by Trio Gibran, a very well-known Oudist group. So you can enjoy the music, enjoy the words, the powerful words of Mahmoud Darwish. Next slide, please. Okay, now another a prominent figure in Palestinian literature is Ghassan Kanafani, who was a political activist and was deeply committed to the cause of Palestine. He is considered one of the most prominent Arab novelists and playwrights of the 20th century. As Israel always focuses on silencing Palestinian intellectuals and cultural figures, the Mossad assassinated Kanafani in Beirut in the year 1972. They had placed explosives in his car, which killed him and his niece, Lamis, who happened to be with him at the time of the explosion. And by the way, my father called me Lamis after her because he was a big fan of Ghassan Kanafani. His novels have been translated into many languages and they are available online. Many of them are available and you can buy them online. I recommend 3 novels, my favorite novels. I feel that you might really like to read those novels. So Men in the Sun is a very good novel, a story actually. All That's Left to You is also nice, and Returning to Haifa is also worth reading. Okay, now next slide, please. Okay, literature behind bars. Palestinian writers, poets, and novelists in Israeli prisons have used literature as a prominent medium to express their resilience, and also expose the literature, expose the nature of the colonial authority. Of course, there's a huge number of Palestinians who wrote novels and articles, even books inside the prison. Israeli prisons. And there are also some others who wrote about their experience when they were released. Like, for example, Mahmoud Darwish. He wrote some of his literature inside prison and outside when he was released. So I chose to talk about two, actually, because I feel they're a little bit special for me, at least. Okay, so if we can move to the next slide, I can start talking about Bassem Khandaqji, who was born in 1983 in Nablus. And actually, what is important about Bassem is that he won the prestigious International Prize of Arabic Fiction for his novel, A Mask, The Color of the Sky. Now, his novel won over 133 other works submitted to the competition. And to tell you something about Bassem, he was born in Nablus, the occupied city of Nablus, and he was imprisoned for 20 years. He was at the age of 21 when he was arrested. While in prison, Bassem wrote over a dozen novels that were smuggled out. You know, it's illegal to write, or it's not illegal, it's allowed or banned to write inside the prison, the Israeli prison. So what those writers were doing is that they write and they smuggled their literature, like piece by piece or paper by paper. Whenever someone comes to visit them, they would give them a small part of their work. So sadly, after news spread about him winning the award, he was severely beaten and tortured by Israeli prison authorities. As his sister mentioned in one of the meetings in which I was present, she said when they found out that he won and he smuggled his work, they tortured him and he was beaten. And he was also put in solitary confinement. In the next slide, I'll be talking about Walid Daqqa, who is also a Palestinian prisoner and novelist, and he was imprisoned for 38 years. Throughout his imprisonment, Daqqa faced a series of sanctions imposed by the Israeli prison authorities to prevent him from writing. His book, The Melting of Consciousness, in the melting of conscience, in 2010, or redefining torture, has now become a scholarly reference in prison writings. This book is very important. I really recommend this book. I don't think it's available in English, but it's there on the Al Jazeera website for free PDF. So what you can do if you are interested in reading this book is to maybe put it on Google Translate or something, or other translation tools, because it's a very, very important book. It talks about how Israeli prison authorities work on the psyche and the psychological shifting of the mind of the Palestinian prisoners. That's why we see many Palestinian prisoners, when they're released, they are totally different people. So despite his long imprisonment, Daqqa insisted on pursuing life. In the year 1990, he got engaged. And in 2020, 2 years after his sentence was extended, he and his wife decided to have a child. His child, Milad, if you can see here, the little girl wearing orange with drums, that's Milad, his daughter. And that's her mom carrying his photo. So Milad, his child, was conceived through smuggled sperm. And this is a very common way that Palestinian prisoners use in order to have children while they are inside Israeli cells. And Dakka died in this year, actually, 2024, at the age of 62 due to complications of cancer. He had cancer. However, we all know that it was due to medical negligence and the slow killing policy carried out by Israeli prison administrations against ill Palestinian prisoners. And we have so many examples of Palestinian prisoners who were ill and were not given the chance to good medical care. Next slide, there is Al-Khazna. This is a novel by Ismat Mansour, and this novel is inspired by a story, a true story, a real story of a group of Palestinian prisoners in an Israeli prison who dug a tunnel. You can see here in the picture, this is a picture of the tunnel. And on the other side, you have an Israeli officer trying to figure out how they dug this tunnel. So that was the Galboa prison break that happened in 2021 when 6 Palestinian prisoners escaped. They escaped Galboa prison, which is a maximum security prison. It's not like any prison. It's the security level is very, very high in that prison. So 6 days later, the 6 escapees were recaptured, unfortunately. So the author Ismat Mansour also used this story and added a romantic twist by also including a love story in his novel. In the next slide, I'll be talking about Naji Ali. If you can please move to the next slide. Okay, so this is Naji Ali, who was one of the Arab world's most popular cartoonists. And he was true revolutionary who stuck to his principles. And of course, this was not acceptable by his enemies. Thus, he was assassinated. So as you can see, most cultural figures or influential cultural figures are or have been assassinated because, you know, Israel doesn't want people like them to tell the story and to tell the narrative. So usually they are assassinated or silenced. So he was assassinated in London in 1987. Al-Ali's most famous creation, I don't know, maybe some of you are familiar with Handala. Handala is the little boy that you can see in the cartoon over here, on the right, the left corner. This is Handala, very famous Palestinian symbol. So this was created by Naji Al-Ali. Handala was a symbol, and Naji Al-Ali said that he was born at the age of 10 years old, and with his tattered clothes and thorny hair and bare feet, he resembled the children of refugee camps. He's always portrayed from the back. We never see his face, and usually his hands are clasped. I think this is a symbol of rejection to occupation, oppression, and all the unfortunate and harsh reality we are living in. Handala became an immortal symbol of Palestinian defiance. And in Arabic, Handala means bitterness. Actually, some people say that Handala represents Naji because Naji was 10 years old when his family was forced to leave Palestine in 1948. If we move to the next slide now, please. Okay, now I'll start talking about music and the importance that music played in the Palestinian resistance. So prior to Nakba, people used to listen to the radio. It was the only way to listen to music. So there were three radio stations at that time. In the 1936, there was the Radio Jerusalem, and also there was the Near East Broadcasting Station, Voice of Britain, in 1941, and it broadcast from Jaffa. Now, Palestine Broadcasting Service also was a radio station. In villages, however, people did not have their radio devices at home, so their folkloric songs were their main sort of musical form. So they had their folkloric songs in which they used to sing in weddings and social occasions and gatherings. And here I'd like to also talk about the tarwide, the Palestinian tarwide, and beneath the slide there's a link for the tarwide in which you can see later on and understand what we mean by this art. So tarwide is a form of singing mainly used by women dwelling in villages. And at the time of Nakba and even before Nakba, tarwide had a very important political significance because during the Great Palestinian Revolt in 1936, the British mandate deliberately cut off communication between the revolutionists and their families. So in response, Palestinian women created this kind of singing to secretly deliver messages. It was like a secret code to their loved ones in prison. So the technique was that they kept repeating the letter L in their singing in a way that distorted the language. Neither the occupier nor their translators could comprehend what they are saying. And women walked along the outside walls of the prison, delivering their messages through the barred prison windows. And you can watch the video, as I told you, and see what we mean by this art. Next slide, we have... Okay, so here in this picture, this is also a very clear evidence that before Nakba, there were Palestinians living in Palestine, and they had culture, they had theaters, they were civilized people, and they actually existed. This is Kulthum in the picture, and this is like an ad from a newspaper or a magazine back in the prior to Nakba period. And actually, Kulthum is a very, very famous Egyptian singer. She's called the Star of the East and the most famous Arab singer in the 20th century. And the other singer that you see on the other side of the photo, this is Asmahan, also a very important Syrian singer who used to spend her vacation in Jerusalem. So this is also a proof that people had culture and enjoyed music before the establishment of the colonialist state of Israel. Next slide, please. Okay, now During the 70s and the 80s, many bands, musical bands, emerged. Some of them were formed in exile, and some of them most of them actually were formed in exile by diaspora communities, like Sabrin band that you can see here. And also I included some videos if you like to watch the songs. Al-Fajr group, Al-Ashiqeen. Okay, now this is a very famous Palestinian singing group. All of them actually sang committed songs, as they call them, committed songs, which means patriotic, revolutionary songs, and they kept the people in this mood of resilience and revolution. So they were very powerful and very influential. Next, please. I have so many slides, I'm sorry, but because it was important to talk about culture without showing you photos and poetry. So excuse me for the huge number of slides. Songs of homesickness and longing. We have this type of songs that was very, very popular during the first Intifada and even before the first Intifada, because people who left during Nakba were still missing Palestine and still wanting to go back and to return. That's why we see a lot of songs that talk about homesickness and longing, like this song that is very famous in our culture by the famous singer Abu Arab, which is called Haddi Ya Bahar. As you can see here, the lyrics, it's like talking to the sea, to calm and to take them back to their homeland, because the sea in Palestinian culture is like your gate out and in your country. So they went out, some of them, through the sea, and the Mediterranean would always lead to Palestine for Palestinians. So that's why he's talking to the Mediterranean Sea, and he's also saying that he misses his mom, his olive trees. His mom is smelling they're still smelling their pillows. So it's actually a very sad song. Now, during the first Intifada, now we can move to the next slide. The first Intifada, or the national uprising, many of the musicians left Palestine because it was hard for them to, stay. But some of them actually were very prominent and very, very influential in Palestinian music and revolutionary music in particular, like Mustafa Al-Kurd, for example, the oudist and theater pioneer. Suhail, okay, I don't know why the
Khouri.
Suhail Khouri, but I don't know why the slide is like this. Anyway, okay, so Suhail Khouri, and also we have Walid Abdessalam in the other slide, the third photo. And those three were very, very influential with their music. And as usual, Israeli policies wanted to silence them. So, for example, they were arrested, and Suhail Khouri, let me tell you this story about Suhail Khouri. He composed the first cassette of, that talked about revolution and intifada and all these patriotic feelings. So the Israeli authorities found 15,000 copies of this cassette, and they found out that Suhail Khouri was the composer. So he was arrested and imprisoned in 1988. And during his imprisonment, he and his fellow prisoners who were actually musicians used to come up with different ways in order to play music in prison. So what they did was using the dangling electricity pipes from the ceiling and using them as a flute or a nai. So that was also driving the Israeli prison guards mad as they were searching for the source of music. In the next slide, we have Rim Banna. Next slide, please. Next. Oh, is there a problem? Because I have the same slide. Oh, yes, Rim Banna. Rim Banna, a singer from Nazareth, and during the first Intifada, Rim gained access to the hearts and homes of many Palestinians initially, and then she became well-known over the Arab world and sometimes internationally. Her music was different because it offered a new modern rendition of Palestinian traditional songs, and but without erasing the historical, cultural identity of the music. In the next slide, we have modern music. And modern music, I'm going to talk about some important or some famous singers. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, is there a problem? Oh.
They will fix it. Just 1 second.
Okay, no problem. So I can go on. So I will talk about some young singers from the younger generation after 2000. So we have okay, let me go to my slides because I forgot the order of them. So let me see. Okay. Sana Musa and Nai Barghouti were among the young generation who worked hard to preserve Palestinian songs and work on them. So that was the Sana and Nai are examples. Dalal Abu Amne, also from Nazareth, is another example of a Palestinian singer. And actually, she's also a neurologist. She used her art to celebrate Palestinian identity, although she lives in Nazareth, which is regarded as Palestinian occupied land before during Nakba. So she celebrated Palestinian identity, resisted culture erasure, and she has been working on reviving Palestinian music and in reinterpreting the songs. Now, again, it's also at a high cost to be a musician or a singer who sings for Palestine. So Abu Amne also was arrested on 16th of October 2023 by the Israeli police after expressing her opinion on Facebook and using a Palestinian flag emoji in her post. So after that, she got arrested and her family was subjected to death threats and protests outside their home. Another important, okay, so let's move to the, okay, this is Nai Barghouti and Sana Musa. Let's move to the next, please. Next slide. Okay, this is Dalal Abu Amne on the right. who I told you expressed her opinion and was arrested. On the other side of the slide, we have Mohammed Assaf, who is actually among the modern generation of singers in Palestine. And the story of Mohammed Assaf is very, very inspiring and very strange, actually. And it symbolizes our life because Assaf was a refugee kid. He grew up in Khan Yunis, a refugee camp in Gaza. And amidst countless hardships of living under military occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing, Assaf discovered his passion for singing. And he started to sing at a very young age. He was very motivated, and he decided to go to the auditions of Arab Idol in 2013. This is a program for, discovering musical talents. So the auditions were to take place in Cairo. So he went to Cairo, and of course, it's not easy for a Palestinian to travel, especially for Gazans. So he arrived late to the recite hall, and the gate was closed. So he literally jumped over the wall to get inside the audition hall, and he couldn't get a ticket. So luckily, he found a kind-hearted Palestinian boy or guy, contestant, who felt sorry for him, and he knew Assaf from Gaza, and he knew that he had a very beautiful voice. So he gave him his ticket, and he went in, and the judges were astonished by his voice, and he finally won. So it's like a symbolic story for the struggle that we have to go through, even if we want to do anything in our life. And he's very popular among the young generation. Now, in the next slide, we have, now Palestinian musicians also have been influenced by new types of music, Western music, like hip hop and rap. So this is Tamer Nafar. He formed a Palestinian hip hop band, one of the first bands to rap in Arabic. And their music became very popular, and it became more political after the death of one of their friends. Now we will move on to a different type of art and talk about two painters in the next slide. Okay, art, resistance, and identity. Okay, so Palestinian painters also played a crucial role in resistance and affirming Palestinian culture. In response, Israel banned art exhibitions. They were banned for a very long time. Not all of them, of course, the ones that carried some political significance, and even the grouping of the four colors of the flag, Palestinian flag, was also forbidden in the paintings. Now, I will talk about Ismail Shammout and Sulaiman Mansour because they're very, very influential and well-known artists in Palestine. So Ismail Shammout is considered to be one of the most, if not the most prominent artists, and his works have become graphic epics that depicted suffering and displacement. And also, I say, Sulaiman Mansour is a Palestinian painter and sculptor, author, etc. And he also had joined the New Vision collective that boycotted Israeli supplies. So instead of buying Israeli supplies, they used to use local materials like mud, sand, henna, even spices like sumac and cumin in order to paint, because they didn't want to buy the Israeli material. If we move to the next slide, I'll show you some examples of their work. Now we want to move quickly through the slides because I don't want to take all the time. Okay, so we have Ismail Shammout. This is Life Prevails. This is a very important painting for him. and it shows Palestine, 3 women. Of course, Palestinian women are very important in our culture and art, because Palestinian women symbolize land, symbolize motherhood, symbolize love, rootedness. So that's why we see a lot of Palestinian women in the paintings. Next slide, please. Now, this is Sulaiman Mansour's Camel of Hardship. And this is actually a very, very famous painting, and it's the most famous maybe for Sulaiman Mansour. It was painted in 1973, depicting an old porter carrying Jerusalem on his back. The Camel of Hardship has been printed thousands of times and hung in numerous Palestinian and Arab homes. In almost every house had this painting. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, in the next slide, I will be talking about another famous painting, yes, by Sulaiman Mansour, The Bride of the Homeland. Mansour's second iconic painting was of the martyr schoolgirl Lina Nabulsi, who was killed in 1976, and the occupation forces prevented anyone from photographing her. So Mansour decided to paint Lina Nabulsi lying on the ground in her blood-stained school uniform in order to keep her alive in our memory. The last slide in the painting section is for a young Gazan artist. Can you move please to the next slide? Okay, Malak Matar from Gaza. She's a very young artist, but she's really good, and her artwork has been shown in 80 countries. And she tries to focus on bright colors and positive themes, as we can see in her painting. And also she has some symbolic elements like the dove here in this painting. Next slide. Now I will start talking about graffiti, which is also a very important art in resistance. So graffiti and street art have long been the mouthpiece of populations that are neglected or ignored, criminalized by the state. So during the first Intifada, graffiti played a very important role in raising people's morale. Now, many Palestinians spent years in prison just because they've written something on the wall. Can you imagine? So graffiti is often removed by the authorities. I remember the Israeli soldiers breaking into our house when I was a little girl, and they asked my father to go to the neighborhood, to a place in the neighborhood, to a wall where there was some writings and some spray paint, and they asked him to erase it by painting over it. So it was banned at that time. And the process of redrawing became an art of resilience for Palestinian youth, especially. Okay, let's move to the next. So here we see graffiti and paintings also. This is one of Banksy's drawings on the wall of the apartheid wall, the separation wall. So they used it as a canvas for painting. Okay, next, please. Here we have other graffiti and paintings on the separation wall of prominent figures like Shahid Tamimi and Shirin Abu Aql, Abu Ammar, and Layla Khaled. Next. Okay, this is Bilal Khaled, graffiti artist from Gaza. I like to also include Gazan artists in my lecture because they're a very important part of our community. So Bilal is a photo journalist and a painter, so he decided to use graffiti instead of using the pictures of death and misery. So that's his way of expressing. This is al-ahlam, which means dreams in Arabic, what you see behind him. Next slide. Okay, now I will talk about photography, because it's also a very powerful tool and medium of resistance. If we can see in this photo, we have two photos. So in the first one, we see a lady carrying her shoes. So this lady was photographed while she was going to church on a Sunday. And suddenly she saw some clashes between Palestinians and Israeli soldiers. So she decided to take off her shoes and start throwing stones on the soldiers. So this is a very important photo, which shows that Palestinians by nature are prone to resistance and resilience. The other photo is of an old lady who is hugging her olive tree, because, as you can see, it was cut by Israeli settlers. So this is a very, very touching photo for me, because it shows the love for the land and the rootedness. And also, if you can see in the back, we have Israeli soldiers protecting the settlers. And this is actually the norm. So settlers would go and attack Palestinian farmers, and the soldiers will protect them. Okay, next. Now, this is the iconic photo of Faris Aoude, captured in the year 2000 by the Associated Press photographer, and it's a very symbolic and important photo. Faris Aoude standing alone, facing a huge Israeli tank. And also, it's important to mention that he was shot in the neck afterwards, and he was left bleeding for 1 hour before Israeli soldiers allowed the paramedics to reach him. And he died when he arrived at the hospital. Next photo. Okay, I think many of you know this, because it's the photograph that won the Reuters photography by photographer Mohammed Salem this year. A Palestinian woman holding and embracing her niece in one of Gaza's hospitals. Next. Okay, this is also a very well-known photo by Mustafa Hassouna, the Right to Return protest. And this photo went viral because it's very symbolic. And it won 3rd place in the Sony World Photography Contest in 2019. Next slide. Okay, now I'll talk about the national symbols. I guess now you are familiar with most of them, especially during the last war. Or the ongoing war. So the Palestinian flag, of course, and the Palestinian flag was also banned at some point. So before, I guess, 1993, people were not allowed to be seen carrying Palestinian flags. Even at home, we couldn't keep any Palestinian flags. And I remember, okay, I keep talking about my childhood because many things happened. So yeah, I remember myself drawing the Palestinian flag as a kid. I had the drawing and I put it under my pillow because I was afraid that the soldiers would break into our house anytime and maybe arrest my father. They wouldn't arrest me at that time because they had like this amount of humanity, but now they can arrest children and they can arrest anybody. So the kufiya, and I'm wearing the kufiya now, it's a very important. The map, as you can see here, it's used in necklaces and other symbolic decorations. Tatris, which Sonia will talk about when I finish talking. The V sign, you all know it, olive tree, handala, and the watermelon is also a new symbol that has been added recently. Okay, next slide. Okay, Palestinian cinema, I don't think I have time to talk about it. So I've written some names of important Palestinian films that you can watch. Some of them are available on Netflix, some of them are not. So I just wanted to highlight those movies. The last one is my sister's movie. She's a film director and she won 2 prizes this year for this film. Okay, next slide. Challenges. Okay, I'll talk about this very quickly. So there are challenges to cultural preservation in Palestine. First of all, erasing Palestinian identity through appropriation and theft. This means that Israel works hard to forge its cultural image by mirroring the surrounding countries. That's why they are stealing music, food, traditional dress. They are naming the streets even. The streets with Arabic names are being replaced with Hebrew names. The cultural genocide in Gaza, which is also very, very sad because, cultural war is also as destroying and devastating as the real war. So Israel, since October 7th, has torn the cultural fabric of Palestinian life in Gaza apart, and it's ensuring total erasure of Palestinian identity and collective memory. So it destroyed the cultural centers, museums, killed almost 30 Palestinian artists and writers. Also, they destroyed the archives in universities, and that included some centuries-old manuscripts and historical artifacts and treasures also have been severely damaged. So Israel is also targeting ancient mosques and churches, which are symbol of historical and religious significance, as well as the well-known history of interfaith coexistence in Gaza and in Palestine in general. There are some efforts for preserving the culture and protecting it through museums, through cultural institutions, diaspora efforts, raising awareness internationally, solidarity tourism, groups like Artists Against Apartheid, writing cookbooks of Palestinian dishes, online classes, campaigns for Israel's exclusion from cultural events and festivities. So all of these could be effective. Raising awareness also among non-Palestinians is very important because it's a way to fight all attempts to forge the history and resist also the appropriation of Palestinian culture, launching national and international initiatives and efforts to safeguard Palestinian heritage is also very important. I'm almost done. Let's move to the next slide, please. Here you have a couple of recommended websites. And actually, I relied heavily on these websites in preparing my lecture for today. They're very interesting if you would like to know about Palestinian culture. And in the next slide, I will do some marketing for my program, the past program at Birzeit University. This is a picture of our foreign students from different parts of the world dancing dabke. So in our program, we teach Arabic, we teach Palestinian dialect, we teach also other courses, as you can see in the next slide. Please, Arabic courses, and we have other courses with Palestine question, which is a very important course if you are interested in knowing more about the history and the question of Palestine. Modern contemporary Arab thought, Arab society, women in Arab society, and Palestinian cinema. This is a new course that has been added to our collection of courses. And I'm almost done. I just want to go to the next slide because this is how you can contact us. Okay, next. Of course, the previous slide had the pictures from trips, which we used to take our students to in order for them to see different places in Palestine, see the culture, see the places which are influenced by the apartheid wall, and so on and so forth. And if you want to study at PAS, you can contact us through these addresses. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, okay, next slide. I just want to say something. Here I have included my email in case you want to email me or ask anything about Palestinian culture. Thank you. I'm done. Thank God.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was a very broad and very, very interesting overview of Palestinian culture and its role in the resistance and resilience. Now let us move on to Professor Sonia Nimr, please.
Okay, hi. I can't control the slides, can I? No?
No, unfortunately,
okay,
no.
go to slide 2 then. Go to slide 2. Not this one. This is advertised. Yes. Okay. Hi. My friend Lamis talked about the Palestinian culture, the art, etc., etc. She talked about people. I am going to talk about things, but things which are alive. And she talked about cultural genocide. Cultural genocide actually starts usually, as always, when you have a settler colonialism and they want to erase the and make ethnic cleansing, but also they make cultural cleansing and they make cultural genocide. What I'm going to talk about today is about Palestinian old culture that depends on agriculture. Palestinian society has always been there, and they discovered agriculture around 9000 BC, which means that all our society revolves since then around agriculture. Next. Okay, let me talk about dance. Dance, for example, Lamis talked about a little bit about music, and she said that there is a folklore music that is way before radio that people used to sing. That people used to sing about every occasion you can imagine. Dance is also reflects the agriculture. It reflects the movements of the dance is usually like the movement of agricultural activities like plowing or collecting olives or getting the harvest from the wheat or whatever. So the singing and the dancing usually reflect the agricultural society that we lived in. Next, please. I'm trying to be quick. Okay, storytelling is not a Palestinian thing. Storytelling has been with humanity since ever. Storytelling, traditionally speaking, used to be where grandmothers talk about stories, about mythological beings, about fables, about adventures, something that people are familiar with, like Alauddin or Ali Baba or whatever. All these stories that attract the attention of the listener. However, in Palestine preschools, the grandmother who tells the story plays two roles in the Palestinian society. First role, she's the one who teaches morals. For example, she picks stories. If the audience are children with their mothers, she usually picks stories which talk about courage, about friendship, about love between friends, about protecting each other, about being honest, etc., etc., etc. She's passing lessons to the audience, basically. The other role she plays is the social worker. Not yet. Can we go back, please? Thank you. She works as a social worker. Usually, if you talk about agrarian societies, usually families live together in one big house, which means that there will always be quarrels between people. There's always be fights between people. Usually, the grandmother who tells the stories has an eye on who is who inside the circle that's listening to her stories. For example, if she has a mother-in-law or a daughter-in-law or sister-in-laws who had a fight, so she picks a story that tells about fight between siblings, for example, or a fight between mother-in-law or daughter-in-law, etc., etc., and she fixes the story so in a way that the women intended to listen will get the message about the fight between them. So this is the fun part about telling stories, is that you can retell the story every time in a different way, depending on who's your audience. These stories usually are not intended for children. They are intended for everyone. And children are usually the bystanders, if you like. They sit there with their mothers. The setting for the storytelling is very informal. For example, women will be sitting, maybe embroidering, or maybe making tea, or maybe, I don't know, making vine leaves or whatever. So usually it is very, very informal setting for the storytelling. But on the other hand, there is the other setting in the same village, for example, which is the men's domain. This is where men gather in the guest house of the village, where usually they invite a storyteller who occasionally comes perhaps once a year or whatever. And he gets paid by maybe olives, maybe eggs, maybe, I don't know, wheat, depending on the season that he comes in. And usually the setting is more formal. Usually they sip coffee instead of sipping tea with the grandma. Usually he tells the story in a formal language, in the classical Arabic language, sometimes accompanied by a one-string violin, which is called rababa. So he recites the stories of the legends of big men in history, very famous men like, I don't know, Antara or whatever, all these legends. So we have two different settings of storytelling. Having said that, that was all before 1948, which I'm sure by now you're familiar about this Nakba, or the expulsion of 2/3 of the Palestinian population and making them refugees. So now women in the refugee camps are compelled to tell different stories. They don't talk about fables anymore. They don't talk about, I don't know, Ala-ad-Din and the magical lamp or the genie. Now they talk about the homeland. They talk about stories of their villages, the stories of, I don't know, the seasons in their village, which means that the women played the role in refugee camps, in the diaspora. They played the role of the guardians of history, if you like. So the stories moved now in the refugee camps, and they talk about the homeland and the lost paradise, and what did we do in the olive season? What did we do in the wheat season? As if the women, by being the guardian of history, they're passing history to the next generation and the generation after, and giving them, this trust, if you like, to keep history alive, so they can fight for it. They give them Palestine back so they can get it back, actually, with resistance. Next, please. Today, we also use storytelling to keep the history. And this is one of our famous storytellers, apart from me, that is, called Adel Tartir, who tells stories of magical box and tells the story, goes to schools and talk to children. And this is one way also to not only to entertain, but also to pass messages about resistance and about the history of Palestine. Next, please. Okay. Theater is ancient in Palestine. It's very, very, very old. As if you look at the left slide, which is not very clear actually, it is the shadow puppet. The shadow puppets were used way back during the Ottoman period, which means that we are talking about 17th, 18th, 19th century. Puppet shows usually is, for entertainment, but on the other hand, it is one way to talk about resisting, because people hated the Ottoman period. They hated the oppression, and they cannot speak about, how bad it is, or how hard it is to be under this occupation of the Turks. So what they did is they used the shadow puppets to tell the story. But when you laugh and you laugh about the characters, you also get secretly a message of resisting this oppression. On the story, the theater continued during the 20s, 30s, 40s of the last century with various subjects. But can we have next one, please? After 1967, theater played a huge role in resistance. Any play that should be played in Palestine had to go to the military censorship. There is a military officer who reads the plays before we show them, and he censored them. Therefore, in theater specifically, there developed a more advanced theater, if you like, because when I say we, because I was part of that actually movement. I was in the theater, in the resistance theater. So what we did was we put a lot of symbols inside the play. We did not talk about about being occupied, being in occupied Palestine, resisting occupation. We talked perhaps about humans who play the role of animals in a zoo, but they fight and then they reclaim their humanity or whatever. So the symbolism in the 70s, actually, theater was very developed in Palestine. And we used to go to so many different places and show our plays. But we talk about resistance in an indirect way, in a symbol, in symbolism. Next, please. I'm trying to talk quickly because we need some time for the question and answer. Right. We talked about nature, and nature has always been very generous in medicines. People hardly in the old days used medicine as pills, for example. Generally speaking, if you have a stomach ache, you have sage. If you have headache or you can't sleep, you get chamomile, etc. So we used herbs basically for medicine, and it has been there for centuries. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, all right. We passed through two slides. The two slides were about sage and about chamomile flowers. Proverbs has also always, when you do research about Palestinian proverbs, you will find that almost all of them are connected with nature, are connecting with agriculture. When to plant your seeds, when to not to plant your seeds, when to collect your season, when you do the wheat, when you plant lentils, when you don't plant potatoes, when is it going to rain, when it's going to be sunny, etc., etc. One of the funny proverbs that I would like to share with you, it's called "Damned if it rains, damned if it is sunny." There was a man and his wife who their daughters were married to other villages. One of the daughters makes pottery, and the other daughter is married to a farmer. So his wife told the husband, go and check on our girls. So he went to the first girl who makes pottery, and she says, please God, let it be sunny because I want my pottery to dry. He went to the next daughter, and she said, please God, let it rain because I want my plants to grow. So when he went back to home, his wife said, how are our girls? And he said, woman, cry, damned if it rained, damned if it is sunny, because, you have two daughters with different what they want. So this is one of the proverbs that talks about agriculture and about the connection with rain. Every season in Palestine has a name, and inside every season there are names. For example, in winter we have so many names. For the first 10 days of winter we have a name. The next 10 days of winter, until winter is finished, and then but each name means something about agriculture. For example, when we are in March, we have a proverb says Sa'id Bala, which means that the earth swallows the water and it is now time to put your seeds in the ground. So as I said earlier, everything evolves about agriculture. Next, please. This is the pottery of the girl from the our friend. Next, please. Food. Of course, if you bring people from all over the world and put them in a place which doesn't belong to them, and they don't have a culture of their own, of course they will steal people's culture. I mean, there is one way to convince the whole world that you belong is by what? Saying falafel is an Israeli food and hummus I mean, it has been there for forever. So there are 3 dishes I'm going to talk about today, which are specifically for Palestine. This first one is called musakhan. Musakhan is literally means heated, which means that you have to eat it hot. It is bread, as you can see, and a chicken and pine seeds. The whole idea is that this dish is made in villages simply because we grow the wheat, we have a few chickens in the backyard, and the pine trees are only 5 minutes walk from our house, which means that all the ingredients are grown in the land around the villages. And that's why this dish is very convenient and very famous and very yummy as well. Next. Oh, no, the one before. Yeah, this looks nice. No, the one before. Yes, thank you. Can we go back, please? Thank you. This is called maklube, upside down. Literally, it is upside down. When we cook it, we first put the meat, and then we put the eggplants, and then we put the rice. So when they are in the pot, we actually flip the pot, and we make it upside down. That's why we call it upside down. We call it maklube. The art of maklube is not the cooking. The art of the maklube is to be able to flip your pan without breaking it. It should look like a cake. And this is how you judge a good cook from a bad cook. If it, goes all over the place, it means, aha, you're not that good cook. So this picture is of a good cook, okay? Next, please. This is how we flip it. And the art of flipping is another thing because it's not always that easy. Next, please. This what we call mujaddara. Mujaddara is a very simple dish, very simple. It's only rice and lentils or wheat and lentils with fried onions. This one is around because it looks nice, but usually it's on the top. And this is the food of the poor because it's full of protein, but it is from the land. Let me mention something, although I didn't want to be too academic this night because this is the last lecture and I wanted to make it fun, but almost 99.9 of our dishes depend on wheat and not on rice. Rice is a newcomer. Because Palestine, the Middle East, is a wheat country. Like, for example, in Brazil or Latin America, it is the corn. Or like in Asia, it is the rice. So for us, 99% of our dishes and our recipes depend on wheat rather than any other ingredients. Wheat in every shape and form that we can use. And mujaddara is one of those dishes that we depend on wheat and lentils, actually. Next. Okay, there are some traditions and customs, again, depending on the agriculture. To start with, something called al-aune. Al-aune is a tradition in villages that when you build a house, the whole people of the village come and help you do it. Nobody builds their own house on their own. Nobody goes and pays money for a contractor to come and build their houses. Usually, people of the village come and help in building these houses. And this is what we call aune. The other picture is when you finish picking your olives, you go to your neighbor and you help your neighbor with their olives, because this is, again, aune. This is how the whole village come together to help each other during seasons or during special occasions, weddings, funerals, even circumcision. There is a huge party that the whole village share in when they circumcise a child. This is not a happy occasion for the child, though, but it is for the village. Next, please. This is where the fun starts. Embroidery. Let me tell you something before we go into the next, please. Okay. Embroidery is the one best way to show, not only to show the culture, to show so many things. Can you imagine 50 years ago when a girl walked in the street wearing her embroidered dress, you will be able to understand whether she's married or not, approximately her age, if she's married, whether she had children or not yet, from which area she is, and sometimes you can even know which family she comes from. All these symbols you can find in the dress. So the dress is not only something nice to wear. The Palestinian embroidery is much, much, much more than that, especially in the areas where they actually embroider. Of course, the girls used to embroider their own dresses, especially their wedding dresses. And the dress and the embroidery is also one way to show wealth. Of course, let me explain another thing. Next, please. Next. In this picture, we see women wearing embroidered dresses. Let me tell you a secret. Everybody, when they think about Palestinian dress, they always think of an embroidered dress. Next. Next. Thank you. Embroidery is very, very important, as I said earlier, in dresses. But the secret is not all of the Palestinian women wear embroidered dresses. Embroidery is not common everywhere in Palestine. Embroidery depends on the agriculture again. For example, in the areas where they plant trees, like in Galilee, or in Hebron, or around Jerusalem, or around Ramallah, usually women embroider their dresses. Why? Because they have all the time in the world. They plant trees. You're not going to wait for the tree to grow. So you have time. You get busy once or twice a year. But the rest of the year, because your agriculture is trees, so you're not busy in the land. Therefore, you can go into the lavish embroidery. However, if you talk about areas where they grow wheat or vegetables or seasonal agriculture, we don't have embroidery. For example, I come from a village called Tubas. And in this village, we don't have embroidery. So how do I show the wealth of my family if I'm not showing it with embroidery? Well, I show it with the length of the dress. In my village, for example, it's not a village anymore, by the way, but it used to be a village. We depend on the length of the dress. We use very, very long dress, very, very long sleeves, sometimes 3 meters, to show wealth. And on top of that dress, we wear like a velvet jacket to cover the underdress, which means that dresses in Palestine show wealth as well as the family status, depending on where you come from. But definitely embroidery is from areas where people grow trees rather than in the other areas of Palestine. Next. Okay, these 2 dresses are not embroidery. These are from the north of the West Bank, villages around Nablus. Villages around Nablus, they don't depend on trees, they depend on vegetables, which means that women are too busy all the year round taking care of the vegetables, and they don't have enough time to embroider. Therefore, they don't embroider. Next. Okay, this dress, this is unbelievable dress, by the way. This dress is from Galilee, north of Palestine. This is so ornate, so full of embroidery, simply because they grow trees. But if you look at this dress, it used different techniques. One technique is the embroidery. The other technique is patches, silk patches, as you can see the yellow squares on the dress. What's unbelievable and wonderful about this particular dress is you can wear it both ways, inside out, both ways. You can flip it around and use the other side. So this is one of the wonderful examples about embroidery in Palestine, especially in the Galilee. Let me tell you another secret. In the old days, when the mothers used to go and find brides for their sons, the mother would go to a family and she would ask for a sample of the girl's embroidery. The old mother looks at or the mother-in-law to be looks at the embroidery, and she flips the embroidery to the other side. She looks at the back of the embroidery. If there are too many knots in the back of the embroidery, this means that the girl has no patience. Her thread is very short. If the knots are so far apart, it means that this girl is too lazy. She uses a very long thread. If the back of her embroidery is not neat, it means that the girl is not neat, so she's not going to be taking care of her son's household. So the back of the embroidery actually shows the personality of the girl more than the neatness of the front of the embroidery, which is a fun fact, actually. Next. Okay, this is what we call tabqiya in Palestinian accent, which means patches. This is a mixture between silk and embroidery. This one example that shows also, if you use this, it means that you come from a rich family. And this is, again, one way of showing that you come from a rich family, or your husband comes from a rich family, because you can afford to buy silk, which usually comes from Damascus. So it is not locally produced, but it comes from Damascus. So if you can afford to bring silk threads and silk textiles from Damascus, it means that your family or your husband's family are rich families. Next, please. This is a jacket that women in Jerusalem and Bethlehem wear on top of their dresses. If you can look at the jacket, it's very full of embroidery, and the silk of the embroidery is silk, which means that this jacket is not used for everyday work. They don't go to the field with it. They usually use it for special occasions, because it is silk thread, and it is so much effort has been put in this embroidery. So now we understand that there are two kinds of dresses in Palestine. One which we use for special occasions, and usually we show off our skills in embroidery. The other one is much simpler, and it is for day-to-day tasks. Next. Okay, next. Thank you. I made it in half an hour.
Great. Thank you very much. Shukran. Okay, so we have now some time. This was really very interesting. I got really curious about a lot of things to check out, a lot of references, very rich culture, and very important in the, this was explained in the resistance, resilience, and the memory Palestine. Now we have some questions. There's one question that might be interesting to explore, which is if you can tell something about Palestinian culture in Israel. So there's the Palestinians who live in the 48 border of Israel. That would be, we can go one by one, and then there are not so many questions. So let's start with this.
Okay, Lamis, do you want to answer this one, or shall I?
Your mic, Lamis.
Okay, go ahead, Sonia. Go ahead, no problem.
Okay. Why would I think about Palestinian culture inside 1948 unless because it is the same culture all over Palestine. Having said that, in 1948, because Palestinians have been suppressed by the Israelis, they have been actually under military occupation administration until 1967, which means that, can you imagine, you have only 120,000 people left in Palestine, in their homeland actually, compared to 800,000 who became refugees. So you have 120,000 Palestinians remaining in what was Palestine, now under a foreign and strange and European and military occupation, which is completely different culture. I think in the beginning, and this is what I have seen during my research for my PhD, when I visited many villages inside Palestinian towns in 48, I noticed that they are more clinging to their tradition than, for example, the people in the West Bank who were under the Jordanian rule. Why? Because this is one way of keeping their culture. For example, in every house that I visited, they offered me coffee on coal, not on the stove, but on coal, actually, in every single house. This is one way of saying that although we live under foreign, strange, alien culture, but we still have our own, and we still keep our own culture. So if I would answer this question in very short sentences, I would say they tried to keep the Palestinian pre-48 tradition as much as they could within the circumstances.
Thank you. Lamis?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, actually. And I want to add to what Sonia has just mentioned, that Palestinians who live in Israel are as eager as Palestinians who live in the West Bank to protect and preserve their culture. And in fact, many of the musicians, singers, poets I mentioned in my lecture were from there. For example, Dalal Abu Amne, Mahmoud Darwish himself. And there's also Samih Al-Qasim, Tawfiq Zayyad. We have really famous names and very influential intellectuals and artists from occupied Palestine of 1848. So they are eager actually to preserve their culture and to show their identity. However, regarding some artifacts, some historical places, mosques, because they are under the control of the Israeli government, Palestinians there have no control over them. So these places are often turned into museums, or maybe coffee shops, or maybe dumpster for dumping trash. And some of them were also made restaurants and And some of them were, of course, stolen by Israeli people, and they're now houses for these people. And in fact, I'm not sure that that this is 100% true, but I read recently that even Benjamin Netanyahu is living in a house that was owned by a Palestinian family before 1948. So yes, the people are trying, but of course, again, Israel is trying to silence and erase any voices talking about culture and Palestinian culture there.
Can I
Thank
add
you.
something?
No.
If you talk about subtle colonialism, try to think of the Native Americans, for example, who live in reservations. And this is what happened to the Palestinians in 1948. They actually are living in reservation, which means that you have a New York, which is Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? Is that they are not allowed actually anything about their own villages or about their own towns, which means that the whole culture had been appropriated. Food, clothes, not only mosques at the Lamised and archaeological areas, but also everything else was appropriated from them.
Yes, very clear. I have here a question, but before that, Sonia, I remember very well the taste of maklube when I was in the West Bank. This is a very nice dish. Yeah. But anyway, so Barbara Caetano Nascimento, she says, when Professor Lamy discussed the silencing of music and literature by Israeli authorities, it immediately brought to my mind parallels with the Brazilian military dictatorship, during which the state's censorship severely restricted artistic and intellectual freedom. Now, the question is, how are these forms of resistance, such as music, literature, disseminated within the Palestinian communities? For example, are there books in schools? Is the material easy to find? And the challenges in circulating it due to censorship or other constraints?
Yes, of course, through education and schools, Palestinian schools often integrate national literature, poetry, songs into their curricula. And this ensures that younger generations remain connected to their cultural heritage and collective narrative. We have also a lot of cultural centers in the West Bank that host events like poetry readings, music concerts, art exhibitions, which serve also as a platform for sharing and preserving cultural expression. Maybe also nowadays we have social media and online platforms that can help also many writers and artists through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram to reach a global audience and also Palestinian audience as well. And of course, we have always had the printed media through literature, books, novels, anthologies. They're circulated nationally. And also there is the diaspora community's effort, because people outside Palestine have not forgotten their history and their culture. So we have also a very active movement outside of Palestine for printing, producing music. As I told you in my lecture, there were like so many artists and bands that started in exile, not in Palestine. So there is also this musical movement, artistic movement, literature, inside and outside of Palestine. So I hope I answered this question.
Yeah. Professor Sonia, you want to add something on that?
I just want to add something. What Lemi said is true, but on the other hand, the Israelis are trying to make a censorship and ban so many books. For example, there are thousands of books that we are not allowed to bring to Palestine. For example, books in chemistry, books in physics, etc., etc. There are so many materials, for example, at Birzeit that we suffer because we don't have some material, chemical materials and other materials into our labs. This is one thing. Every book that comes from Beirut, for example, is still banned, and we are not allowed to bring books into Palestine from which were published or printed in Lebanon. The whole idea, again, I'm sorry to keep repeating the same thing, but when you talk about colonial, settler colonialism, this is where they try to oppress people. It's not only by genocide, it's not only by bombs, but also by preventing people from accessing information and accessing education.
Right. That was also the link that where is he? Barbara made with experience during the military dictatorship here. Right. Let me just one question of mine. What can we say about the influence of Palestinian culture in the Arab world?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because of the language, it's easier to penetrate. And yeah.
Okay. Actually, we can look at this interchangeably because we have also been influenced by Arab culture in so many ways, especially in the Levant area. So we have similar food, we speak the same language, we have also similar values. So the influence of Palestinian culture on other countries is visible through literature. For example, Mahmoud Darwish is a very well-known figure in Syria. They always read his poetry, and his books and poetry is sold all over the Arab world. So our literature is a very good example. Our music also, because so many people now, especially during the war, are singing Palestinian songs by Muhammad Assaf. It became like the national anthem for not only Arab countries, but also for international solidarity movements and encampments. We always listen or hear the people there playing Muhammad Assaf's song Ana Dammi Falastini, and many people are starting to sing it in Arabic. So yes, I think also the cinema, Palestinian cinema, has been playing a very important role in the Arab world in order to keep our issue alive. So almost in every film festival, we find Palestinian films competing and winning, and they are there. They are actually leaving a fingerprint everywhere in the Arab world.
Thank you.
Can I add to that something else, actually?
Sure.
I'm going to a different direction, to be honest with you. Actually, before the First World War, there were no borders between Arab countries, which means that people, songs, stories, culture moves everywhere in the Arab world. And everybody is familiar with, there was no Syria, no borders between Palestine and Syria, no borders between Palestine and Lebanon, etc. It is the occupation of the British in and the French to Syria and Lebanon that actually divided this. And when we talk about Palestinian culture started to have its own specific characteristics, if you like, after the British colonialism and after the British occupation. This is one thing. The other thing, answering your question, I think Palestinians became symbol in the past 50 or so years in the Arab world. When you talk about resistance, usually you think of Palestinians, you think of Palestine, you think of the Palestinian embroidery, you think of the Palestinian kufiye, the scarf, you think of, so we became a symbol. And I'm hoping that our resistance now and our steadfasting, despite all this genocide, will make a movement in the Arab world. And I'm hoping that something will happen in Egypt and in Jordan, for example, and taking refusing what's happening in Palestine, but in the same time, taking Palestine as a symbol for resistance. Come to think of it, Palestine was a symbol for resistance back in the 70s, when you talk about Badr Meinhofs in Germany, when you talk about Brigata Rosso in Italy, when you talk about the Red Army in Japan, whatever. So we were symbol all the time for resistance. I hope in the near future we'll be the symbol of freedom. We had too much, that's enough.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was exactly what I was also thinking. Before 7th of October, there was a clear effort to just silence the whole Palestinian situation through this effort of the Abraham agreements, etc. So I think it's extremely important that the solidarity in the Arab world, from bottom up, to make the Arab governments move. There is an interesting, there are many questions here. There's an interesting question from Beatriz Santana on the cultural level. Thank you for the lectures. I've noticed that Palestinian artists often emphasize themes of love for the land and nature in their work. Has this focus always been a prominent part of the culture, or did it become more common after the Zionist colonization as a form of resistance?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very interesting question, actually. I would say that, of course, it increased after Zionist colonization. However, Palestine also had been resisting more than one occupation, because before the Zionist occupation, we had the Ottoman Empire that was also treating people in Palestine and Arab world in a way that was totally unjust, and people were revolting. And also, during the British Mandate, there were so many songs that talked about how British Mandate killed people, assassinated people, how for example, we have a very famous song about 3 revolutionary persons who were also hanged in public. So we always have had this kind of resistance in our culture and in our literature, songs, everything, because we've always been under different occupations. So, but now I think we have a lot more because of what's going on after 1948.
Thank you.
Can I answer? Can I go on a different direction, please?
Sure.
Resisting occupation, resisting colonization, that doesn't mean we are not apolitical people all the time. Come on. I mean, we love, we hate, we climb trees, and we swear, and we do bad things, and we are normal human beings. We are people, which means that, yes, we refuse to be occupied. Yes, we refuse to be under colonization, and that's why we fight back. But while we fight back, we still love, get married, have children, hate our mothers-in-law, etc., etc. So I want to say that we are normal people. Don't think of us having a rifle and the gun all the time fighting. No, I can fight with my neighbor who wants to throw the rubbish away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very clear message, and important to remember always. That's now there is here Isadora Machado has also an interesting question. Since the beginning of the genocide, the photojournalism was responsible to show the whole world the horrific practices of the Israeli armies. Thanks to that, the people of every place in the world know now the truth, what is going on. Photographers like Motaz Azaiza were important to spread these images. However, the genocide has impacted how the art is produced. It's Professor Lamis, what do you think about the influence of the genocide overall on Palestinian culture?
The genocide is influencing all sectors of life, not only the culture and the art and the music. Everything is influenced, the economy, education. For example, in Birzeit University, many of our students struggle every day to get to the university and to reach their classrooms. So everything has been affected. As for literature and culture, of course, it has been influenced a lot. And nowadays, the problem is that people always see art as not as important as other things. So now people will not think about making songs or shooting movies, or people now are concerned about the basics, like their economic well-being, what will happen to their salary, how are they going to earn enough money to keep their life going on and to make ends meet. So I think now the artistic and the literary movement in Palestine is not in its best shape. However, there are some initiatives that were very important, like, for example, in Gaza, they had a movie. I don't really remember who's the director, but it was about filming everyday catastrophes and everyday tragedies that happen to people in Gaza. And also we have witnessed so many songs that were produced since October 7th, not only in Palestine, but also in other neighboring countries in solidarity with Palestinians, for example, in Egypt and other places. So yes, I don't know if Sonia has something to say about this.
I am always the troublemaker. The Israelis know that, because that's why I was imprisoned twice. Okay. What Lamis said is perfectly true. But as she said, you cannot talk about art. You cannot talk about music. All what you have now is actually newsreels. And this is what we usually, everything is concentrated about, making people know what's going on. Usually after a war, after a problem, after genocide, the art becomes later. It's a kind of reflection rather than action. Because people now in Gaza are avoiding rockets and are avoiding bullets. They cannot think of art. They are looking for a tomato and a potato to eat and not thinking of art. So during genocide, during war, you don't think of producing art. You want people to know what's going on, and this is maybe the main concern. Art will come later, when people start reflecting on this genocide and this killing spree that Israelis are doing. And there will be a lot of that later, a lot of art later, talking about what happened.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to end here. Some other questions, but basically we got them all. We have still one lecture on Thursday about resistance and international solidarity. And at the end of the course, we will put together for our students and who have subscribed to this course, we will put together a list of literature and references. Right, Ragda? We will put that together and send them.
Yes.
Where people asking about references, etc. And now there's also on this list, there's a special issue of the names of the dishes that people want to know. So we will put that also.
I wrote them in the messages. I saw the question and I wrote them مقلوبة مسخن and مجدرة. I don't know if they want something else.
Yeah. No, but we will, but not. We will circulate that also, and also other names of the artists that were mentioned and that are people can look it up on the website. I'm sure that those who assisted and will still assist this lecture, there will be a lot of people interested to look references that are mentioned on the internet of cinema, books and other things. Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Lamis. Thank you very much, Professor Sonia. This was a great lecture again. And to our public, we see you in 2 days for the last meeting. And always thank you, Ragda. And I also want to thank Gabriel, because he's not visible, but he is our student who was trying to keep up with the PowerPoints, and sometimes because of the systems there is some delay, sometimes the internet falls. So thank you, Gabriel, and sorry, Sonia and Lamis, that we have no more professional software, but I think it was very clear. We could make good use of the PowerPoints thanks to Gabriel. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, and thank you, Gabriel. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.